Hi, everybody. This is Charles Hoskinson, broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Some of you love the intro, some of you hate it, but I just don't care because I love it. And it's my show, so I get to use my own intro. Good to see you guys. It's May the 29th, 2020. It's a difficult day for a lot of people, difficult time for a lot of people. May has been a difficult month. we have we've had protests, fires, quarantine. I think everyone's getting a little crazy and they're getting a little tired and they're a little worn down, and we're all just frustrated and divided right now. We've been through this before, in the 1960s and 1970s with Vietnam. We were through this before during the wars, and it's cyclic, and there's always going to be times of division. But hang in there. I'm certainly hanging in there, and just keep your faith, keep your principles, keep your integrity strong, and just keep pushing forward. For the Cardano project, this has probably been the best month we've had in a long time, because we were finally able to get to a point where we took code that we'd been working on for almost 2 years and get that code into the hands of the people who knew how to break it, knew how to use it, knew how to play around with it. Those pioneers who were willing to take the risk, the fun, the hazard of dealing with bears and snakes and all these other things, and beating the hell out of what we'd created, the exercises that we'd written, and tell us where we're wrong, where we need to improve things. And that's exactly what they did. And we spent a few weeks learning with them, building with them. And we're profoundly grateful for that. We really are. It made us accelerate things that would have taken a lot longer by ourselves. And it gave us the opportunity to get enough confidence in the code that we'd constructed to actually say, hey, we now have a launch date for Shelley. Still June 30th, alternate date July 7th if the weather's bad, meaning the hard fork combinator has some issue with it that we're testing on the 23rd. And July 29th is the hard fork. So it's just counting down the deadlines, counting down the dates. The next date coming up is June 9th. And that's going to be fun because we're opening up the Pioneer testnet. So Shelleywood, our play on Deadwood, has been built. You can finally go and settle it. The Pioneers built all the structures. They got the town ready to go. It's a nice little mining town. I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with it. Won't be around for long, though, because that'll be shut down when we open up the main net. Anyway, I'm real tired, but I figured I'd do an AMA because you guys deserve one. It's the 29th. I didn't do one last week, and it's always fun to talk to the community and see what they're thinking. And as with all AMAs, we can talk about pretty much anything you guys want to talk about. Love, life, politics, crypto. Nothing is off hold. So first question from Octoman PC. What the fuck is that Tyson Quick's problem on Twitter? What a dick. His problem is that he's living in an environment where only one opinion matters. He's in San Francisco. There's a reason why I didn't found my company in San Francisco. When you're an entrepreneur, you think about these things. You say, well, where do I want to go that has the right mixture of access to capital, talent, good labor, these types of things. And San Francisco is certainly a great place for that, but it has just terrible, terrible monolithic culture. You have to say things, think things a certain way, and if you don't follow that, you're the enemy. There's no room for debate. There's no room for tolerance. It's the least tolerant of all places if you don't happen to drink from a certain well. You see, at the end of the day, I'm not a partisan. As I mentioned in my prior video, I spent a huge amount of time running around the whole world, been to over 50 plus countries. I regularly deal with heads of state all across the political spectrum, whether they be hyper-capitalist or hyper-socialist, some cases dictators for life. So when you live in that type of environment, you have your personal political opinions, but then you have your political realities that you have to traverse between. But one thing that I've tried to keep, despite the fact that we have such political diversity, are basic principles about how I think people ought to be treated. And those principles are reflected in the work environment I have in my own company, the way I make decisions about staffing, and the efforts we put into our protocols and products. And we try to empower people, enable people, and we do care a lot about the people who have the least amongst us. We have a very simple test for the protocols that we design. They have to be fair, and fair means that it doesn't matter where you came from, what geography you're born into. It doesn't matter whether you won the genetic lottery or not. You have equal access and equal right to the system as Bill Gates does and Jeff Bezos does. You can't predict these things. Some people are born with terrible disabilities. Some people are born in places with no internet and terrible infrastructure and in absolute abject poverty. And we shouldn't create a society and a world where if you get lucky, that's the only way you can live well. We should create a world where, because of the amazing technology we have and all the social progress we've made, that no matter where you're born or what happens to be your life story, you have something that can allow you to live well and comfortably and with dignity. The point of these protocols is that they can deliver this to the world, and we do so without the use of force. One of the reasons why I despise socialism, communism, these systems, and they're all just flavors of it, is that these systems tend to view the world in very draconian terms. You create a super powerful central entity that gets to decide what's fair, and then it takes from one group and gives it to the other group, all screaming equity. In some cases, this works, but in many cases, that hyper centralized group gets really, really corrupted. And then they start reallocating things not based upon need or wisdom or judgment, but based upon political access. And we saw this with the Soviet Union. And that's the most extreme example. 100 million people died. That's just a fact of the 20th century. It was just a disgusting, terrible thing. And nobody seems to really want to revisit that, or they say, oh, well, that was just a different flavor, and our flavor is great and merciful. And then they point to certain countries and say, well, these are great examples of what we want. And then they find out that those countries are fairly capitalistic when you actually tear the layers off of them. So, it's an interesting thing. And I spend my time mostly focused on the nuts and bolts, the infrastructure of society. And I have a lot of faith in people and trust in people. This is another difference between San Francisco and me. Gun rights are a great example of that. The whole point of saying people should have guns or be allowed to have them is saying, I trust my neighbor. That's what it really comes down to. I trust you enough that you can have something that can kill me, but I'm still okay with you having it because I think you're a rational, mature person. When you start having society fall apart, usually the ills of that stem from the fact that you lose trust in people. You look at your neighbors not as friends, but as potential competitors or enemies or people that are against you. And there's 1,000 other things you could look to where you start losing touch with people and you stop thinking of the local community. You stop thinking of people as assets or people that can work with you, help you. And you start saying, well, I can't trust anybody, so I need to build systems that are intrinsically paranoid and start taking things away from people proactively to protect each other. I will remind you, Switzerland, for example, is a very gun-friendly country in a certain respect. They trust their citizens with military-grade weapons and train them how to use them. And they have one of the lowest rates of gun violence because the society works in a particular way. It's not the only way to do things, but it's something to think about. And it's a different way of looking at these particular issues. But I often don't comment on them, except for when I see that people are starting to suffer from propaganda. As I made my video today, it's getting to a really bad point where people are incapable of listening to opposing opinions. We used to have this saying that you can disagree without being disagreeable, but now it's gotten to the point where that is impossible. If you disagree, it's not because we have different values or we're different people or we look at the world differently. It's because you're an evil person who wants to harm me. And the only option I have is to destroy you, to prevent you from harming me with your harmful opinion. That's where we're at. This technology doesn't work if society has regressed to that point. You simply do not have the cognitive tools, the social tools to be entrusted with things as powerful as your own money, your own privacy, your own identity. This is not batteries included. There are no custodians here. The point of cryptocurrencies is to push power to the edges, and with great power comes great responsibility, as Spider-Man's uncle reminded us. And that great responsibility is the responsibility to be self-sovereign, to be master of your own life, and to use these powers with great wisdom and still try to collectively build a better society, despite the fact that you can cause great harm. That's a scary thought for people who have no faith and trust in humanity. And these great centers of tolerance, such as San Francisco, they tend to forget that, and they tend to really like hypercentralization. That's why Twitter and Facebook and all of these other companies that have come out of those realms tend to look the way that they look, and they tend to regress and become these dystopian, hypercentralized, top-down entities that basically tell you what's best for you. Okay, so that's the answer to that question. I disagree with my response to the objection of CIP1. That's great. Actually, I love the fact that the CIP process is rolled out. For those of you who don't know, when you want to evolve a cryptocurrency in a decentralized way, the standard mechanism of evolution of a cryptocurrency is called an improvement proposal. So you have Ethereum improvement proposals, Bitcoin improvement proposals, all kinds of these things. And we have our own, the Cardano improvement proposal. So we're just starting to roll this out slowly. It takes a little bit of time. We have to get the community used to it. And we have a lot of unique challenges in the Cardano ecosystem that Ethereum and Bitcoin do not have. The biggest of which is that we'd like to connect the CIP process directly to the formal specifications. So one of the big challenges that IOHK and the Cardano Foundation are working on right now and will not be finished until the end of the year is how do we find an easy way to hand those specifications over to a more independent, neutral sort and link them to the evolution of the CIPs. It's not easy to write a formal spec. And we wrote the formal specs with a very particular opinion on a reference implementation, i.e. the Haskell implementation. But if you want to go build your own Cardano node in C++ or Java or Python or JavaScript, which will happen as the ecosystem evolves and develops, we're already a little bit of a polygut because we have a Rust node and a Haskell node. Then you both have to have a common source of truth, and that's the specification. If the specifications are written in a way that are only useful for one type of implementation or one type of thought, then that's counterproductive to development diversity. So we're going to have to reevaluate and think very carefully about how we handle formal methods so that it's amenable to third parties participating and being involved in that process. And it's something that we're actively discussing, and it's a lot of work, and the problem is the set of people who are really good at writing formal specs is quite small. There's only probably a few thousand people floating around the world that are really, truly good at this, and a lot of them work for me. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge. We have to perhaps reevaluate better ways to do that, but we'll get there. Thoughts on the Ernst & Young Nightfall in the Cardano ecosystem? We wouldn't use it. If we wanted to do something like Nightfall, we have a significantly better proof system called Sonics that we unveiled at the ZK Proof Summit. And there are better ways of doing things. The reason why Nightfall exists is that it's a smart contract on top of Ethereum. In my view, it's much better to have protocol level support than overlay support because you'll guarantee a significantly larger anonymity set. Second, you have significantly lower operating cost. It's very expensive to send a Nightfall transaction, like several dollars expensive. That's not a practical system at scale. So if you're going to do it, you have to do it at the protocol level, and zero knowledge proofs really aren't where they need to be yet for that to make sense. Furthermore, you also need to have smart contracts that enjoy private computation. So we wrote a paper on that called Kachina. There's another paper called ZEXE that the Zcash guys wrote, which is quite good. And I recommend reading both of them if you're interested in the topic. But that's really the next logical step, just not the blind movement of money, but also computation. All right, let's see what else we got here. I can't see nations using a third-party national currency. Crypto will be facilitated for value movement, but not including utility or business contracts. Well, actually, nations use third-party national currencies all the time. If you live in Greece, you use the euro. That's not issued in Greece. So it's quite common, actually, amongst the diversity of nations in the world to invite foreign currencies or transnational currencies. And in some countries like Kenya, actually, utility tokens like M-Pesa are just as popular in many places as the sovereign currency, if not more so, because they have less volatility. In Argentina, it's very common for people to store and spend value in the US dollar, and the government tries very hard to prevent that, but there's not much they can do. because the dollar is much stronger than the peso. So I disagree there. Hey, Charles, any comment on CT that Cardano is still vaporware, even the mainnet is releasing? Wait, Cointelegraph said we're still vaporware? I'm not really following your question. Restate your question. Give me something better. Hey, Charles, any update on Direct Ledger support? We were supposed to do a demo actually at the product update in May for Ledger and Daedalus Flight, and that got pushed back just a little bit. But actually, at the same time, Emergo just announced that they have Ledger support on Yoroi Mobile, and so there's great work on their side. Anyway, we'll have a video coming out with Darko doing a demo of Daedalus Flight doing this, and that's going to be a fun thing. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. We've been working on it for a while, and it's not just Ledger, but Trezor, and then we're thinking around, could we add other things like U2FA, for example. I was a little sad that we weren't able to get that into the presentation yesterday, and I got a last-minute abort from Darko's side on it. But probably next week or the week after, we'll be able to do a demo and roll it to flight. So it's coming very soon. Hey, Charles, what are your thoughts on Algorand? Is it a competitor to Cardano? I don't really view it as a competitor at this point. Their commercialization strategy is not super clear to me. And I'm not a huge fan of anybody who preserves intellectual property with their blockchains, the patents. That said, I have tremendous respect for the team, and I have tremendous respect for the science that the team has done. And I think Silvio is one of the great geniuses of the 20th century. So it's always fun seeing their work, and occasionally there's things that make sense for us to collaborate on or use. For example, they wrote a great VRF implementation. So there's little things like that that come and go. And I think overall they're one of the good actors in the space. And I like to see more of them because while we have differences of opinion about science and technology, we disagree without being disagreeable, meaning that we get along with that team and occasionally talk to them from time to time. I have a lot of respect for the Zcash guys as well. Will Ledger Live allow staking? Likely not, but cold staking is a requirement for Ledger integration, and the Vacuum Lab guys are doing that. So when we release Shelley, we should have that firmware update done, unless there's a delay on Ledger's side, but it will support staking from the Ledger. Oh, crypto Twitter CT for yeah. I see CT and I think Cointelegraph, and that's why I was getting confused. Yes, I'm very tired. Hi, Charles. Hi from Colorado Springs again. Love the project, the dedication, the vision. Thank you and the entire team pulling this off. A lot of time and effort making this happen. Yeah, I love Colorado Springs. Beautiful city, some good barbecue down there. It's always fun to drive through Castle Rock as well and go to that outlet mall, get some new shoes. It's a beautiful state. When can we expect Daedalus Mobile? It is not in scope for the 2020 contract, but we do have a great mobile experience through Yoroi, which I would highly recommend. For the renewal, we will propose a mobile plan that we think will make us best in class, and we'll certainly have that at a later date. The MOAP, mother of all proposals. Hi, Charles. Will today's ADA still be valid after hard fork? Yes, 100% will transfer over. The user really doesn't have to do anything, just credential rotation so you can go from the legacy address to the new addresses so that you guys can stake with those addresses. But they're the same mainnet. In fact, one of the reasons it took so long to ship was that we had to find a way to accurately preserve fidelity and history. It would have been a lot easier to do what EOS did, which was issue an ERC20 token and then do a airdrop to a completely new chain. We didn't do that. We launched with our own network, and we had to somehow find a way to preserve that network and roll it over to the Shelley network and not allow all the sins of the past to cause problems, but at the same time be able to validate them and do that one code base in a very natural, graceful way. Super hard. And it took a lot of work from EDSCO and others like Duncan to figure out how to do that well. And I'm real proud of them, actually. I really am. The work was exemplary, but it was an extraordinarily difficult problem. It's not commonly done in our space. Any multi-corporations approach you with for interest real life applications? Yes, we've had many. It's very easy to work with large corporations at the science level, pilot level, prototype level. The problem with these critters is that it's very deceptive, and we see this game played a lot in our space. So, oh, we have partnership with Google, or a partnership with Samsung, or oh, we have partnership with this firm. And then what happens, you work from 6 months to a year, and they do something, and then it gets internalized, and the company pivots, and they build it in-house. If you go and do something with Google, you always have to ask yourself, after they've learned everything they can learn from me, why wouldn't they just do this with their 1,000 engineers that could do this at any moment and could be reassigned without compromising any existing products, instead of hiring me to do it and using our particular blockchain? What value does this provide? They have larger network effects, they have more engineers, they have more resources. So they're not super interested in friendly integration and basically shilling a particular platform. More often than not, they use these platforms to beta test something in a neutral, politically acceptable way, and then basically they bring it in house over time. We saw this done, for example, with IBM, where they had initially a very close relationship with Ethereum to the extent where they were even considering using Ethereum as their enterprise strategy. And now we have Fabric. And I remember early days with Ethereum where they did a project with Samsung that was an IoT project. And basically they tried to build an IoT product with Ethereum, and that didn't work out so well. So you see this a lot. JP Morgan Chase is another example of this with their blockchain group. So I'm a bit hesitant to say that large companies are the way to go. And frankly, the way that we can get the fastest, best growth is through the SME side, small to medium enterprises. They have just as much need for a lot of things we're doing, and they don't have the in-house resources to go and replicate a solution that end to end. They'd rather just use something. Also, small governments as well. Okay, so for your Daedalus paper wallet, David Umar, there's going to be a transition where you can rotate to another form of that. And you're going to want to do that because even if you're storing your wallet as a paper wallet, you'd want to rotate it to an address you can stake from so that you can leave your paper wallet as a cold staked instrument, meaning that it stays on paper. Your private keys never touch Daedalus, but you actually have a management set of keys that allow you to control from the Daedalus interface who you delegate to. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get paper wallet security, but you also get to participate in staking. So you're going to need to go to V2, and that'll come out around the time Shelley launches or shortly thereafter, depending upon Darko's team. How's the Africa strategy coming along? Quite well. We're bidding on a lot of stuff. We got a big thing with the ATA we're bidding on, and we've gotten a lot of deal flow out there. We've been around long enough that people trust us. Takes about 2 years, 3 years to become part of the family. Then everybody just talks to you and you kind of figure stuff out. But it does certainly take a point to get to a point where you have a deal that makes sense. A lot of these deals that are proposed, they are not batteries included. It requires enormous amounts of work, to fix them up to a point where you can actually make money, or at the very least, produce something of value to people. And there's always the same thing. There's tons of excitement. They always want to do something, and then it dies on the vine somewhere along the way. So you have to have a lot of patience to do business in Africa, and you have to have a lot of domain expertise, and you have to have people physically in the jurisdiction. It's funny. We see some of these projects run by, oh, we got this deal with this government. Oh, yeah, we know this. We know this president. We know this person. It's like everybody knows a president. Everybody knows some king. Everybody's got a connection. Putting a deal together, much harder. The only way a deal works in a place like Africa is that you have to align the incentives so that nobody who who lives in that jurisdiction, let's say Ethiopia, Rwanda, whatever, has an incentive to kill the deal. They want to keep the deal alive because it's in everybody's best interest to do so. So you have to build consortia. You have to build public-private partnerships. You have to make sure the money makes sense all around. You have to make sure local businesses are involved. You have to make sure there's political consequences, like they'd have to fire local people and like a whole village would get laid off or something. When you put all those pieces together, then you have something real, but it literally takes years to construct all those things. So it's not a game for the fast. It's about 3 to 7 years to get something done. That's why we always had a long arc view, but ultimately it's the most meaningful because if you pull something off, you change the lives of millions of people, and you give them access to significantly better systems than we have in the United States. And they suddenly wake up 10, 20 years from now, and they can build real wealth with those systems to an extent that they end up actually competing more than the United States or Europe does or China does. And so the fastest growing economies will be in Africa in 2040 and 2050 if we do this right. And that's how I'd like my legacy to be. I really care a lot about this, and I spend quite a bit of time in Africa when I'm allowed to travel for this reason. And it's also just fun. It really is. Some of the best moments I've ever had have been just going and meeting these incredible people all throughout Africa who have nothing. And yet they're just the nicest, happiest, most interesting people who have the brightest outlook on life. And it just regenerates and recharges you. You hang out with all these neurotic rich people when you go to New York and Connecticut. I have a lot of hedge fund friends, and they show you their artwork and this other stuff. And then they talk about their 4 ex-wives. And you're thinking, man, I don't want this life. And then you go to some place in South Africa in the townships, and you talk to some guy, and he has 1/1000th of that, and he's significantly happier. You say, okay, there's some wisdom here. So I really enjoy that a lot more. And it's fun working there. It just takes patience. Good old Steve. Yeah, he's a good guy. Do you have any contingency, Shelley release celebration planning, or is mountain climbing 18-year-old whiskey and paragliding still in the cards? I was going to go to Antarctica, and I stopped working out, and I got lazy, gained some weight, didn't do the cold training, all that stuff. I'm sad about that. Why? Because coronavirus. That's the easy excuse, but I need to do better. Every now and then we let ourselves down. I let myself down on that. Next year, I'll go to Antarctica and do that. For those of you who don't know, I was planning a trip to Antarctica where I was going to go climb Mount Terror, and I was going to paramotor down from Mount Terror after climbing it, and I was going to do it shirtless, basically in the snow, using the Wim Hof method. And I had actually this Finnish Arctic explorer and all these other people lined up. Even a photographer used to take pictures for National Geographic. I collect all these weird friends, and when I told them I was going to go to Antarctica, they're like, "Yeah, I'll come." And I said, "I'm not going to pay you." And they said, "I don't care. Just pay the trip." Um, anyway, next year I'll go, and it'll be a lot of fun. And I was lined up to train with Wim Hof too in March, and that got canceled because of Corona. It really is depressing. So many great things got canceled for everybody because of Corona, not just the fun stuff, but business stuff as well. And a lot of opportunity was lost. So hopefully it'll get better. Hey, Rick. So Rick, how's Pioneer Day working for you? What exercise are you on right now? The economy got canceled. Yeah, for this year. Tomorrow's SpaceX Day. Yeah, many of you might not know this. My cousin works for SpaceX. He was one of the guys that worked on the launch pad for the Saturn V rocket. SpaceX bought that, and his job was to refurbish it and get it ready for the Falcon 9 Heavy and Starship and all these other large scale rocket programs that they have. SpaceX is probably one of the most remarkable companies I've ever seen. They started from such a simple premise that, hey, technology's gotten a lot better. Why are we still doing things the way we did things in the 1970s and 80s? Let's just apply modern stuff. And first, let's come up with a plan to make space travel significantly cheaper and reusable. Okay. But then they built this cult of ideology around this concept of making humanity multiplanetary. And so what they were able to do was leverage these two components together to convince super brilliant people to join the company at a significantly lower salary band than they would get at Boeing or Northrop Grumman or any of these other companies. Many of you may know that I went to CU Boulder. And when I was at CU Boulder, SpaceX was very aggressively recruiting from CU Boulder. Now, my university is famous for astronauts. I think we had like 19 astronauts go to CU Boulder. It's a great aerospace school, great aerospace engineering. So all the time, the recruiters from Boeing and all these other places would always be trolling the halls, and the students never wanted to talk to them. Boeing come and be like, "We'll pay you $200K a year," and SpaceX would be like, "We'll give you $45K, and you'll have like 3 layers of cubicles stacked on and you'll work 900 hours a week." And they're like, "Yeah, man, SpaceX, it's the way to go." And if you ever visit their facility in California, it actually really does feel a lot like NASA in the 1960s when they were building their way up to the moon landing. They're just all young, they're super passionate, they're super excited, and they legitimately believe that this is the vehicle that will get humanity to Mars. And honestly, if the economics continue working out the way that they do, SpaceX will probably accomplish that by 2030. It's a remarkable thought. It really is, given that we weren't even in the top 10 for manufacturing of rocket engines, the United States, when SpaceX was founded. Now we're the number one manufacturer in the world, and we have the best rockets and the cheapest rockets and the most efficient rockets with the best technology to get into space as a consequence of this one company. And it's fundamentally changed the entire procurement model and the ratings model. ULA got their asses kicked, absolutely asses kicked by SpaceX, to a point where they went from the most reliable vendor to the least reliable vendor. And then the other thing is that SpaceX has the ability to take risk. NASA doesn't anymore. They had the rocket just blow up, I think yesterday or today. I can't remember, the Starship. They don't care. They'll just build another one. Remember, these Falcon rockets used to blow up too, and they picked them up off the beaches. And they just fix it, go on to the next one. And that was how NASA used to operate. They said, look, attrition happens, problems happen, exploration is risky. Look at the people who tried to go through the Northwest Passage. Some of them succumbed to cannibalism. It's probably a worse way to go than blowing up on a rocket. So we'll roll the dice. We'll take the chance. People are willing to do it for the greater good. Let's push it. Let's push it to the wall. Get people inspired again. That's their culture, and it's really forced humanity into a new level. So I have a huge amount of admiration for SpaceX, and I think it's one of Elon's better ventures. Tesla's certainly another one, but Jesus Christ, SpaceX is just a special company. And that launch tomorrow, if it's successful, will be the dawn of a new era for human space travel. And suddenly things like the moon and things like Mars will no longer look so far away. They'll feel like inevitabilities. I remember my dad and my grandfather, they grew up in a time where there was an inevitability about it. When Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon before the end of the decade, people believed him. And when Bush said it, no one believed him. And when Obama said it, nobody believed him. And when Trump said it, nobody believed him. So there's a cynicism and skepticism in these projections. But when Musk says it, I kind of believe him. So we're getting that back. We're getting that magic back. And that's what you need to be successful. If you're an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, the first thing you have to achieve is belief in your own vision, no matter how crazy it is, belief in yourself. And the second thing you have to achieve is to be so delusional that you can convince other people around you that your vision is real and you actually can achieve it. It's a pretty crazy thing to do anything new, especially when there's a high probability of failure, greater than 90%. And that's what Musk did. And that's what SpaceX did. And they did it at such a scale and level. They even convinced NASA and the US government that they could be the horse to ride on. And if they pull this off, then everybody will pretend like it was self-evident and obvious, and this is just a way to do things. Before they were founded, it was not. So it's an amazing thing. Yes, I have met Musk, Youssef. He used to come see Boulder a lot. His brother actually owns a restaurant. Kimball Musk owns a restaurant in Boulder called The Kitchen. So occasionally you'll see his brother, in some cases, still cooking. Brother's a billionaire and he's a chef, and he'll actually cook and talk to people. So Musk does come out here a lot. Flies his jet. He has this beautiful Dassault Falcon. I don't know if he still has that one or if he upgraded to a Gulfstream or not. But he'd fly it to Rocky Mountain Airport and going up to see Boulder, recruit some kids, do a presentation, and then go eat with his brother. He's a super nice guy, very introverted. That selfie with Musk and I, that was when I was at CU Boulder, and I was still a student there at the time. Any McCann news? Yeah, you'll see the McCann news with Cardano.org. They're working well. Obamagate. Yeah, that's a more interesting one. When I was a kid, I remember reading about Watergate, and the scandal of Watergate was that a US president was spying on his political opponents, and then there was a cover up. Now we have a situation where a US president uses US institutions to spy on the opposing political party. And you can say, well, there was legitimate reasons for it or not, but you'd have to imagine that such a thing would be a pretty sensitive affair. And it wasn't really treated this way. It was done through the FISA process. And what we've discovered is FISA in general is, and we've known this for a long time, is a just horrible mechanism for actually having checks and balances for oversight. And nobody cared about it because we use FISA on uh, people living in caves and people with no money and no political access who have strange names and speak strange languages. So people say, whatever. Now we're starting to use it on political candidates. So what would stop Trump from basically doing the exact same thing to Biden? It's not a good precedent, and it cannot go down that road. And this is the same scale, in my view, as Watergate. And, the dishonesty as well, where people under oath in secret meetings would say one thing and then immediately leave and go and talk to the media and say the other thing. It just shows you that we've descended to a very bad era of hypocrisy where it's okay to lie as long as you get your ends. That's a system bereft of integrity. And it shouldn't be this way. It honestly should not be this way. So I hope it all works its way through. I'm very skeptical it will. Everything is so political that people aren't really concerned about principles anymore. They just don't care about the truth. They just don't care about integrity of systems. People will do what is ever necessary to get power, and they'll do whatever is necessary to stay in power. And this is a bipartisan thing. Republicans have certainly done some horrible things as well in the United States. So I think, guys, the only way we're going to solve this at this point is a constitutional convention. We have to actually replace the existing federal government with a new structure. I have no ability to vote my way out of this, nor do you if you live in the United States. I live in a blue state, if you live in a red state, as I mentioned earlier this morning. So what does this functionally mean? It means that these elections are vacuous. The system doesn't let you actually pick the people who get to run. Those people who succeed in running are pre-selected. We saw this with Clinton. We saw this with Biden. The only one we've had in recent memory who wasn't was Trump himself, and he found a way to work within the system and make himself acceptable, which is why he picked Reince Priebus as the chief of staff and Pence as the VP and so forth, and managed to work his way through that. So the only way we're going to solve it is a constitutional convention at this point, and fundamentally rewrite the way that we elect our officials, institute term limits, change the way that our money works and our budgets work, push more things to the states, especially social policy, so you have more dynamicism there. There's got a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's not something that can be done today, but it will be done sooner rather than later, because America is fracturing. We're falling apart. Wherever you fall on the political spectrum, it's just not acceptable that our cities are burning. It's not acceptable that people are filled with so much rage, hate, and anger, and that it's become a political game to take people and make them hate each other just so that because of that hate, you can get wealth and power. all you're doing is you're destroying a great nation and you're destroying a great people. This is the country that dreams the big dreams. This is the country that gave the world the internet. This is the country that cured the big diseases, that invented antibiotics. It's a great nation. And the world is a significantly better place because of us. But at the same time, we're squandering that greatness and we're descending into a chaotic division where we no longer view each other as part of a same universal culture, the American way. And now we view each other as a bunch of tribes that have to fight each other for some table scraps. And just today, where somebody said, I didn't earn my money. At the time, my grandfather, wealthy people were admired. They say, well, that's the American dream. Congratulations in achieving it. Now, if someone has money, you didn't earn it. You're not real. You stole it from somewhere, or you inherited it, or you got lucky, and screw your business acumen. We must destroy you. You have to pay your fair share. Apparently, I live in a tax haven. Colorado is a oh, when I say, well, I live in Colorado. No, you don't. You live in Wyoming. That's news to me. I'm on my farm right now. I pay taxes in the state of Colorado. I don't have residency anywhere else. Got a Colorado driver's license, Colorado plates on the cars. But no, we can't believe that because, this is where we're at. It's not a healthy thing. And if this continues, there will be a civil war. That's what's going to happen. Maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years. But that is where we're being led. No one trusts institutions anymore. No one trusts anything anymore. We're losing our core. We're losing our integrity. And we're viewing people who disagree with us as the enemy. The longer that continues, the worse it's going to get for everybody. So it's got to stop. It absolutely has to stop. It's quite a scene in Washington right now. It's insane. Yeah, and people have every right to be upset. Guys, years ago, if you look at my tweet history, I remember tweeting about a cop who threw a flashbang grenade into a crib, permanently blinding a child. And the cop later on laughed about it. These things happen, and they say, oh, but not all police are like this. And I said, well, the problem is the institutional culture. The war on drugs created this incredible vice wing, and it created an incentive for these departments to get progressively more powerful. Local governance decided to view these people as revenue collectors instead of people who keep law and order and peace. And because the departments never admit problems when they occur, it created a culture of hiding things. This particular officer who killed the person, if you look at his record, he's killed multiple people and many, many, many complaints of abuse. And just it's a revolving door. And the saddest part of all of it is this is not just an isolated case that never comes up. We've seen a lot of it. And I'm disgusted by things like civil asset forfeiture, for example. That's another thing that should be protested every day. It is the closest thing to state-sponsored theft the United States has ever come up with, where a police officer can pull you over, find a bunch of cash on you, and say, I'm going to take that money from you. Okay, it's mine now. And the only way you can get it back is suing the government to prove that it's legal money. Can you imagine that? Where I, as a private citizen, did that to you? I show up, I see $5,000 sitting in your front seat, your car. I just take it, put it in my pocket, say, well, it's probably drug money. You have to sue me to get it back and prove it's yours. And oftentimes people settle for less than what was forfeited. Billions of dollars every year, civil asset forfeiture. There's many cases. Drywaller in Virginia, driving his car, just got paid for his work, and gets pulled over. They say, oh, well, that's drug money. And they just take it. Move on. It is theft, pure theft. Where's the outrage there? It's not these little events. They're highly emotional, and they certainly should be talked about. But it's the institutional and systematic events that have to be discussed because those impact the lives of hundreds of thousands to millions of people, from the war on drugs to these types of things. And they have to end. They absolutely have to end. They've destroyed so much and hurt so many lives. I remember in 2012 when rule number 12 was changed as the final censorship of the Paul campaign. Yeah, Rick, that's why I didn't go to the Republican convention that year. We had so many delegates, we should have been able to speak on the floor. They changed all the rules for the convention at the convention without a proper vote to basically silence Paul. And they said, look, if you back off and you don't cause problems, we'll be good to your son and we'll let him be a senator. So he did. But it was fucked up. It was so fucked up back then. So I feel for you, Bernie guys, because we went through it in 2008, 2012. I was eating with a mask on going, I went to a restaurant that didn't require me to do that. That's called voting with your feet. Aloha from Hawaii. Mahalo. For those of you who don't know, I was actually born on the island of Maui, and it was my home for several years. And I still go back whenever I can. I truly do love Hawaii. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. Charles, how's Prism and what can we when can we expect a showing? I assume that's the question. Mass adoption. Prism's great, and we'll have a demo at the Iowa Case Summit, the summit that we're doing in July, and there's a lot of real cool things to show. Billy Ferguson says, police in Roanoke, Virginia pulled me over because I was switching lanes in and out of traffic, and I was in a 330 Ci BMW, less than a year old at the time. I have 53,000 cash on me, and they took my car and my cash. I assume that's finishing the statement. And my money, and told me someone would be in touch. Yeah, I'm sorry you went through that, man. Welcome to the theft state. Hello from Switzerland, another one of my favorite countries. For many of you who don't know this, but Switzerland actually doesn't have a head of state. It actually has a committee that rules it, and they call it First Among Equals. When are you coming back to Canada, sir? My chief of staff lives in Toronto, and I often do try to go up to Toronto because we have so many good friends up there. So as soon as I can, but I think the borders are closed right now, or even if they weren't, it's difficult. Is Prism a DID platform? Yes, Prism uses the DID as the basis of identity. The DID standard. Hi, Charles. Are you still retweeting pool introductions? There's got to be a more efficient way of doing it because I miss a lot of them. I'm sorry, guys, when I do. But yeah, if you tweet me, I'll be happy to retweet. Hello from Gillette. Gillette, Wyoming. No shit. It's where my parents live. Unless you're talking about the razor. Is Mantis still relevant? No, not really, but there's something going on there. We can't talk about it, but there's definitely something going on there. We found something special. When I said I still have some shit in my back pocket. Yeah, there's something there. Given how globally changed Disruptor Ada will be, do you ever fear being assassinated? If I get assassinated, I get assassinated. It happens. You know, You don't get to choose when you go out. Die of cancer, die of a heart attack, get hit by a car, whatever it is. But you know what? You just get to choose what to do with the time you have, and you can't live in fear. And you can't believe that the people who have the world the way it is are so powerful that they can never be removed. The reality is that every dictator, every evil can be corrected if good people are willing just to stand up and fight. And sometimes you have to make some sacrifices along the way. But what the hell else are you going to do with your life? Live as a slave? It's better to die standing than on your back. Yeah, I do need a haircut. The sad part about Caesar, by the way, Octoman, was that actually, if they had just left him well enough alone, he would have never come back to Rome. Julius Caesar was obsessed with Alexander the Great throughout his entire life. He referenced him many times in the commentaries. And actually, that was one of the reasons why he got so pissed off when Pompey was killed in Alexandria in Egypt, was that his plan after becoming dictator for life was to basically go and reconquer all the territories that Alexander the Great had conquered and leave a political class in Rome to basically run things in his wake. But he had no intention of just sitting around Italy for the rest of his life, getting fat and being king. This is the guy that subjugated the Gauls. And, those were the dudes who sacked Rome just a few hundred years earlier. So if they had left well enough alone, he probably would have accomplished that and made substantial progress, or at least gotten killed on the field of battle, and they wouldn't have had to have assassinated him. And it's a great example of what happens with blowback. The fact that they assassinated him created a political environment where Octavian was able to systematically kill everybody who opposed him and become dictator for life and establish the empire, became Augustus Caesar. So sometimes the best thing to do is just simply to leave well enough alone and get out of a person's way and let them go have a destiny with history. Just avoid the Clintons and you should be okay. Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, that's one area where I'll agree with you guys. Looking at your office, you got nice paintings. Did you watch Bob Ross growing up? I did. The Joy of Painting was one of my favorite shows. Google is using Rust. Google uses every language, guys. But they're predominantly using Java, JavaScript, Go, and Python. They have a few other languages here and there, and a lot of specialized stuff. They've even written their own programming languages for internal things. But Google certainly, it wouldn't surprise me if they have several Rust projects, but I'm willing to wager there's a lot more Go code than Rust code. Yeah, the gladiator painting is from Jean-Leon Gérôme. Why I love that painting is that you notice that the gladiator is looking up after he's defeated the other gladiator, and that little hand sign is surrender. This is yield. So generally, after they do that, they look to the emperor or whoever's hosting the games. That's the guy in the purple robe, and he gives him the order of whether to save or kill the person who's surrendering. But the gladiator is instead actually looking at the audience, much to the disappointment of the emperor. And the emperor is probably Caligula or Commodus because of the purple robe that he's wearing. I never looked into it. But anyway, the point of the painting is that the gladiators become intoxicated by the perils of fame. And what he doesn't understand is that that very same group of people that loves him, admires him, and is telling him to kill the other gladiator, if he was on his back, would be saying the same thing about him. And the emperor knows that, and the next fight will probably be arranged to remind him of that, and he won't fare so well. So it's a warning to those who get too big for their britches. Have IOHK started an academic research on a stablecoin? We do have a stablecoin team at IOHK, and we do study these things, and we look at it from different dimensions. The actual economic dimension and monetary policy dimension. We look at it from a capabilities and technology dimension. We actually look at it from a regulatory dimension as well. So Bruno Paleo is leading that, and he's doing some great work on it. But we have nothing to say at the moment because it's still early days in that. And I have a pretty strong opinions because I've been thinking about stablecoins for a long time. What is the predominant coding language of Cardano? At the moment, Haskell. And we've done a lot of work to make Haskell work for us. And at this point, we're actually seeing the work pay off. But it did take quite a bit of time. Will there ever be an option to make transactions and balances private? If you guys want it, we could build it. And that's actually something you can talk about as soon as treasury systems turned on and we start talking about renewing the roadmap. The magic of these things is that this goes where you guys want to go as much as it goes where I think we should go. And my job is to get Cardano to a point where Cardano is capable of making decisions for itself. And then we make arguments of why we should go left or right. And then basically people will make that call, and then we as your humble servants will go and figure out a way to do it, or someone else will be your humble servant, figure out a way to do it. But that's how you truly achieve decentralization. That's how you truly achieve a great resilient ecosystem. And you have confidence that that thing is going to be around decades from now. Charles, I contacted the Ethereum Foundation through their grant program for my idea on how to incorporate art for artists. Is this something similar for Cardano? We have something better. When the Treasury launches, you actually don't have to go and talk to a centralized foundation for permission. You can write your own ballot, take it directly to the community, and people are going to be able to vote. And if you have a truly good idea and you're fighting hard enough for it, eventually you'll get funding. And you get funding not from an organization, but directly from the Cardano blockchain. So we will definitely talk about that in the time that it needs to be talked about, sooner than you guys think. And there's certainly a lot of great announcements coming. And I think that'll really supercharge our ecosystem. It's just so powerful knowing year after year there is a replenishing well that will allow people to go and try experiments and cool things, whether that be deploying ATMs or their favorite DApp or whatever it might be, and really get it somewhere it needs to go. So I think treasuries are one of the greatest inventions in the space. And if we get it right, you'll see the same thing that we saw with mining, where it went from a laptop to gigantic mining warehouses. Similarly, if you get a treasury system right, you have this positive feedback loop where it gets stronger and more people are brought into the ecosystem from it. You get more and more certainty and stability because you know that the funds are there to keep the ecosystem going and growing and vibrant. It's a very powerful thing. Can you highlight or talk a little bit about the special guests, Vint Cerf? Yeah, so Vint was Phil Wadler's boss back when Wadler was at Stanford. And so we thought it'd be super cool for now these two old men who were very young back in those days to get back together and start a panel. And we'll have some other people on the panel too and talk about the history of the internet. And in particular, if the internet was made today, what would they do differently knowing what they knew? So it's an open conversation, and the point of that was to really think carefully about Cardano's future, in that if we're successful, the exact same question will be asked of us. We're going to have all these mistakes we made. So we have to understand that we really are standing at the arc of history. And so I felt it was really important to look to the past so that we can have some clarity for the future and hopefully do things a little bit better. And do understand that no matter how well we plan things, there's just stuff that comes up. When Vint was around, the idea of a mobile computer was pretty preposterous. They were very large. The idea of 4 billion computers was a pretty preposterous idea as well. And if the network went down, you'd actually call the person who was running the server on the other side. They had a phone book that would link IP addresses to phone numbers. They even had a phone book for email addresses. So if you couldn't remember the guy's email address, you could look him up in the book and you could find his email address correlated with his name. That's how small the internet was when these guys were building things. Obviously, things have changed a bit, and so quickly that unfortunately some mistakes were made that we're still working our way through. Which is why Google's working on Quick and all these other things. And Vint is a great speaker, so I think it's going to be a really fun panel, and it's just a great opportunity to give us some grounding and some sense of why we do what we do. What was the first game that Phil Wadler built? Justin, actually, I think it was some sort of Pong game, but I'm not sure. So actually, we'll definitely make that Phil's introduction. We'll ask him to talk about that game because I don't think he gets enough credit for that, and I want to make sure that that gets kind of squirreled away in history, and he gets credit for that. He's done certainly a lot of things throughout his career. He's got more than 25,000 citations, but that's probably one that history shouldn't forget. Power to the edge. Charles, when will more details on the ADA distribution and inflation plan be published? I mean, they're pretty well known. We have 31 billion ADA, and the maximum supply will be 45 billion. As for the exact inflation schedule, we did create some calculators for that, and they're somewhat similar to what the ITN proposed. And there's actually an emission schedule, I think, in the formal specifications. Cardano.org will host our documentation when we do the rewrite, and we're working our way through that. And it'll include the monetary policy update. So that'll be present before the launch of Shelley. Interesting statistic. Current ITN Treasury just broke 100 million ADA today. So that means that when we turn on Shelley and all those ITN rewards move over, the ITN Treasury at the moment today has, what's the price of ADA, guys? 5.8 cents? $5.8 million in it, ready to go for you guys to use as soon as the voting mechanics are turned on. Think about that. Do you know Mike Morhaime from Blizzard? No, I don't. I met Bill Roper once years ago, but not Mike. It's 6.8 cents. Well, shit. So $6.8 million. See, I don't even pay attention that much to price, guys. When we hit $1, it'll be nice because I'll be like, I'll buy that for $1. I already used that once before. Bill Roper, by the way, he was famous for Diablo, and he did some great game development work there. I know a lot about game development, not just because I buy video games, but because I think it's pretty magical. It's one of the last mediums we have for peer communication and storytelling. Charles, do you still own Bitcoin? Yes, quite a bit. Quite a bit of Bitcoin. Charles, are you getting a PS5? I am an Xbox man. That's probably the most controversial thing I've ever said. It's Trump stuff, Biden stuff. PS5 versus Xbox. I've always liked Xbox, although PS is great technology as well. I have a lot of respect for the engineers at Sony. Who's your favorite architect? Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, the canonical question is always Frank Lloyd Wright, right? But actually, I've never really liked his work. I'll get back to you. Next AMA, I'll think about it. It's not something I really think too much about. Do you play Halo? I've listened to the soundtrack, and of course, everybody knows Cortana. Have you considered letting South American vendors use Ada? Let's be very clear here. I don't let anybody use it. Anybody can use it. It's an open system. It's an open, decentralized system. So yeah, if they want to use it, use it. Who's your favorite professional wrestler? There is only one correct answer to that. Macho Man Randy Savage. Come on now. Come on now. It was theater to the max. I mean, yes, Andre the Giant was great. Hulk Hogan was great. It was always fun to see Jake the Snake. But my God, Macho Man Randy Savage. There's just no one like him. Charles, how many ADA users you currently project there is? That's a very controversial and difficult question. We've had over 1 million downloads lifetime of Daedalus, and there's been certainly a lot of Yoroi users. You can even look at those statistics on Google Chrome, and then you can look at statistics about how many people have used Ledger with Cardano, and then you can look at other statistics like the amount of active addresses in UTXO. It's about 340,000. Then you can look at the amount of Telegram subscribers we have. We have over 10,000, the general channel. You add all Telegram up, it's over 50,000, especially when you have non-English language. Then you have the Reddit subscribers, which well over 50,000. So there's definitely a lot of ways you can cut that. But I'd feel pretty confident to say there's greater than 50,000 active users in the ecosystem. And there's probably more than 1 million people who have been exposed to ADA to a point where they're aware of Cardano and they've either used it or played around with it to a certain point. But these things, they tend to grow very quickly once you get to a certain threshold. You look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, or these other ecosystems that are much older and where they've gone. Oh, yeah, 80,000 on Reddit. There you go. Charles' favorite MMA fighter? Chuck Liddell. Your computer specs. This is a Microsoft Surface Studio 2 that I'm using. Mike Foley, Mankind was way crazier than Randy Savage. I don't know. The thing about Randy was that he was just at that level of absurdity that it was amazing, but it wasn't overdone. If you go too far, it's like a parody. Best NBA player except Jordan. Wilt Chamberlain was pretty fucking amazing. And actually, you guys might not know this, but Wilt Chamberlain was actually in a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was in Conan the Slayer. He played one of the guys and actually fought Conan. There's this beautiful picture you can find if you Google it with Andre the Giant, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Wilt Chamberlain together. And Wilt and Andre are holding Schwarzenegger up, and he looks very tiny next to them. And so it's just one of those things that history gave us that kids today don't know anything about. And they once found traces of blood in Macho Man Randy Savage's cocaine stream. Oh my God. Oh, that's great. That's great. Conan the Destroyer. Yeah, that was it. I've never played World of Warcraft. It was after my time. When Rogan, Charles? After Voltaire, when we have a lot more momentum. It would be great to go on there. He's all about Spotify now. He's all about fuck YouTube and the censorship stuff. I think there's going to be a great 2021 conversation with him. Favorite whiskey? The Japanese stuff is really good. This is a dry year, though. So next year, I'll tell you. I haven't had a drink since December. Any details, updates on multi-sig functionality? That should come out with Shelly. We have a multi-sig specification, and we wrote a language for a multi-sig. It's a very simple scripting language to be paired with Plutus. And those capabilities aren't super difficult now, and it was a business requirement of the Shelly code. So that'll come in either exactly at the time of Shelly or shortly thereafter. The harder part with multi-sig is not the scripting, it's the coordination. So you have to send the signature around to get signed, and generally that's done by a trusted third-party server. If we had something like PubSub, then we would be able to easily do that. But we're still talking around how to do that well. So it'll come. It'll come before July 29th, hopefully. Do you play racquetball? No. I was a taekwondo kid and judo. Those were my physical sports. Then I got fat and old. I was pretty good back in the day. Tyson or Holyfield? Guys, Tyson. He's first 4 years younger, and Holyfield's looking slow. Tyson's looking like a beast. I think he's juicing. But, yeah, Tyson's not done. He's got some fire. It's the name of the face painting behind you. That's a Gustav Klimt. What is this Kachina thing I keep hearing about? It is a private smart contract system, or it is a kind of intermediate spirit that allows you to talk to the spirit world, and you have to dance to talk to them, and then they tell you what the spirit world has to say. So depending upon your perspective, it can either give you all kinds of cool, interesting information, or conceal all kinds of cool information. Charles, who's the special guest you were talking about? Vintsurf. Charles, does the oncoming fork mean that a second token will be created? No, it'll all be the same. We spent long time working very hard to make it all the same just for you. Do you own a Tesla? No, I thought about getting one, and I might get the new Roadster when that comes out, if it comes out. They're talking about 1,200 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 1.8 seconds. So that would be really interesting to get. The Lamborghini is 600 horsepower, goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, and that's crazy fast. Yeah, Huracan, great car. I was surprised. Story behind that is that I did some consulting work, and they threw a Lamborghini in to sweeten the deal. And I said, well, shit, now I have to pay insurance on this thing. It's actually not that bad. It's only like $200 a month for the insurance, which blew my mind. The hard part of the oil changes, they range from about $1,200 to about $3,000 in oil change. And my Cadillac CT6 is $60. So I'm like, this is not right. Come on, Lamborghini. Oh, I use that acceleration a lot. I put 10,000 miles on the Huracan. I thought it was going to be like a fun little side thing. It's a daily driver now. Charles House Jameson, the horse, he's doing very good. He's got the jowls. He's a happy horse. Had to just get his teeth floated. No, do not do it yourself. Oil change Lamborghini. That's not a good idea. Don't touch anything. Just let the Italian guy play with it. Okay, let him fuck it up. Real graphene is still holding up well. Yeah. It's great. It's great. By the way, Maseratis are just terrible cars. Absolutely terrible cars. They used to be decent, but I'm not really a big fan of them. Now, I'll do my own oil change on the truck and all the other that's fine, but you just don't wanna fuck with a Lamborghini. If you screw one thing up, you just created $20,000 in damage. Don't touch it. It's very sensitive. Do you own any Arabian horses? No, all my horses are like abandoned, emotionally traumatized horses. I have one horse that was attacked by a mountain lion and a child died. She's a mare, and her kid died of disease. And then the other horse was a breeding horse, and they gelded him, and it really messed him up in the head. And now he's all skittish. For some reason, I just collect horses with emotional problems that are not purebred. And I keep convincing myself one of these days I'm going to get a Frisian, but it never happens. You can already pay with Ada on online shops. Tavala, for example, you can book any hotel. There's a lot of vendors that are doing that. How's the hydro farming? Going very well, very well. TPS and Shelly launch. Preos is somewhere between 150 to 300 TPS is exactly where we'd need to be competitive with all the offerings. There's things we could do to accelerate that, but we're not going to be at that load or capacity this year. And we have lots of things to roll out next year that will take us to even greater levels. So not really worried about it. RENA, recursive internet network architecture. Well, we're going to have a RENA-esque presentation at the virtual summit. We'll have Neil or Peter do that, and the network team do that, and talk about what we've done with the network. We have 106 pages of documentation for the current Cardano network stack that we developed for Shelly. It's one of the crown jewels and hidden gems of the research we've done. By the way, I, as CEO, got in a lot of fights with my network team. We've had some legendary shouting matches, and it's been a contentious issue because they did a lot of work. They reinvented a few things, and they pushed the boundaries of certain things. And at the end of the day, it's now on the other side of the hill, so we get to be very proud of it and take credit for it. But it was certainly a long road. And what's great is that we now have a good foundation for a solid network stack for a cryptocurrency. And most cryptocurrencies don't have that. They work until they don't. And there's a huge amount of complexity, bugs, and problems that are introduced getting the networking to work correctly. Moving into 2021, it would be super cool to have a much more aggressive Ouroboros-like research program where we systematically solve all the cryptocurrency networking problems. And we still feel that RENA has a lot of viability in that respect. Unfortunately, it may require special hardware and other things to be fully realized if we pursued a satellite strategy with Halo satellites. Then that would be probably a way to go. Leo, excuse me. So that would probably be an approach to take as an alternative backbone for the relay system. But a lot to do, lot to do there. But I'm very proud of it. In the virtual summit, we will certainly have a network track and talk about the innovation that we've brought. And a lot of documentation is coming as well. Is Libra dead in arrival? Yeah, any of these things are DOA. I mean, what do you expect? It's a stable coin, okay. Like, why do you get excited about that? There's no monetary innovation. There's no business process organizational innovation. It's just one of those, I have a platform with 3 billion people. Me too, me too. I want to come. I want to be part of this club. Like, go innovate. You have all these engineers. Go do something novel. Did you consult AdaPay, or was this just the foundation? I had nothing to do with that. It was a foundation. Do we have any cattle on the farm? Excellent breed. No, I'm thinking about getting Highlanders for the farm because I'm going to get alpacas too. And I guess you can shave both of them. There you go. Who's your favorite classical composer? By far, Chopin. By far. Absolutely amazing. In fact, I even have a piece here that I'm learning myself. This is Ballet number 1 in G minor, Opus 23. One of his best pieces. When will a state level voting system be available via Cardano? My hope is we can get much more aggressive in Wyoming and do something there in the next 2-year time horizon, maybe at the primary level. I think that's the first entry point in the United States that makes sense given the scope, scale, and the relationships we have there. If not there, then either the country of Georgia or somewhere in Africa. So they're all kind of sudden death type deals, but we'll get there. And it scales very quickly once you have these things. But in tandem, we'll have the Voltaire voting system, and we have a whole voting philosophy that we're pushing out with that. And that's only going to evolve and mature over time. And we're very happy with that progress. Favorite Radiohead song? Creep, but not by Radiohead. Creep by the Creep cover that was done for The Social Network. Quite good. Quite good. Do you know how to swim? I grew up on a fucking island, of course. I grew up in Maui. I didn't know how to swim. Oh, you people. Have you noticed any positive effects using lion's mane? Have you guys noticed any positive effects using lion's mane? Do I sound more coherent? Yeah, I use it every day. By the way, speaking of brain stuff, check this out. Just got it in today. It is something really cool. It is the NeoRhythm, and basically it's a neural stimulation headband. So it's a transcranial neural stimulation device, and you use it to shock your brain, and it makes it hyperplastic for learning new skills. So I will try it out, and I'll let you guys know if I like it or not. There's a lot of peer-reviewed research on transcranial neural stimulation. I also have a Halo Sport over there as well, and I got it for the piano playing, so we'll see what happens. Worst car you've ever owned? My Ford Taurus. Charles, do you listen to heavy metal? Well, obviously Metallica. Did you say it was illegal to have a garden in Colorado? No, it is not. It was illegal to buy seeds, or they were not letting vendors sell seeds in Michigan, which is batshit crazy. Metallica killed Napster. Huh. There's a bug on your blinds, Charles. Those are moths. For 2 weeks, they're like a plague of locusts, and they're going to be everywhere. Do you think when Cardano gets really mainstream that as CEO, you're going to have to change like Zuckerberg and be more political, or you stay open as you are now forever? I'll just stay open and take the criticism. I mean, what more can they say? I've been called a scammer, a sociopath, a narcissist, a horrible human being, an incompetent person, not a leader. People have yelled at me in public. I've gone to cryptocurrency conferences and I've had people walk up to me and say, spit on me and say, "Go fuck yourself." Yeah, obviously I have to get some security at some point, but no, I just keep doing it. Why not? What are they going to do? It's like, I'm not one of these snowflakes that says, "Oh, words are bad, hate speech." It's like, you can't hurt me, guys. My life is great. So I'm just going to share my opinion and do my thing. And, if people like it, they like it. If they don't like it, well, then realize the things we build are bigger than me. And it's a big tent, and you can live on your side of it, and it's okay. If Vitalik and I can be in the same space, and Dan and I can be in the same space, and we don't seem to collide very often, then that's great. A lot of tar monsters out there. I'm actually having custom Telegram stickers made right now, and I will have a molten tar monster sticker. I'll let you guys know when they're coming out. I figured it'd be a nice way to viral market the project. Low cost, high return. Any book recommendations? Currently reading The Art of Learning from Josh Waitzkins. You guys may remember the movie Finding Bobby Fischer, where Josh Waitzkins was considered to be the next Bobby Fischer. And he ended up leaving chess and becoming a Tai Chi master. And I'm actually taking Tai Chi now. I have a Tai Chi instructor coming into the office and do all that Tai Chi stuff. I'll let you know how that works. I think it's going to be like every Friday or something like that. And I figured I'd double down and read a Tai Chi book as well. So The Art of Learning is really cool. I like Josh Waitzkins. What are your thoughts on NMN and resveratrol by David Sinclair? Well, resveratrol is great for your heart. I guess there's some anti-aging stuff there too. You get it from grapes, but it has low bioavailability, so it's a little difficult to take it as a supplement. How's your Guitar Hero skills? Terrible. Charles Hoskinson, what's the biggest ongoing scam? The Federal Reserve right now, they printed $6 trillion out of thin air. Think about how devastating that's going to be. I'm seriously worried about that. They can't keep doing it for long. How do you feel about the progress and contributions of the CF in the Nathan Kaiser era? I think the Kaiser administration has been exactly what it needed to be. During the Parsons administration, it was a time of great nepotism, corruption, ineffectiveness, hostility, fear, paranoia. It was blatantly intolerable. And we did everything in our power, Emergo and IOHK, to try to be friendly and find a way through it, work through it, and just get everybody to the table and agree on basic things. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it eventually came to a head. So when Kaiser came in, it was like, you ever watch the show Star Trek DS9 when the Cardassians left the space station and the Federation takes over with Bajor, and then like the whole place is trashed and nothing works and it's all falling apart. I mean, literally, that's what was left. It couldn't clear an audit to save its ass. The Swiss authorities were like, "What is going on? This is horrific." There was no accounting system, no internal control system, and the legacy of the Kaiser administration is that they restored credibility, integrity, and operating ability to the foundation. And it wasn't even clear if that could be restored to a point where it'd even be able to be saved. But not only have they managed to save it, it's gotten to a point now that Hassan's come in and Nico's come in, and there's been scale up that the foundation has actually become a productive, good member of our ecosystem, and it's doing real work and it's carrying itself. They encouraged the PwC to come in. They've encouraged McCann to come in. They launched the CIP project and did that. And they're just growing so quickly. And so it's a very, very different organization. And it's a lot more fun to work with them. And we can productively work together. And Kaiser has a huge component of that. He's a smart guy. And he had to work very hard and take a lot of personal risk to get these things done. Those who are on the council at Swiss foundations have personal liability for these things. They're not indemnified as much as they ought to be. So it was a big risk to walk into a situation like that and turn it into something that it is today, and have that contribution. The same for Domino Berkey. You know, he's and Meet saying they're all superheroes in their own respect, and they walked into a bad situation and they turned it into a good situation. And I have nothing but enormous respect for people who do that, who are willing to take those burdens for us, our ecosystem, and just do the work you don't get a thank you for. No one ever looks and says, "Congratulations, you've passed an audit." You get an unqualified audit. "Congratulations, you've cleaned up your books. Congratulations, you've installed basic management systems and control systems to prevent what happened in the past from coming back." No, they just say that's the standard. But yet to get to that point from where they were at took superhuman effort and a lot of stressful long nights, a lot of meetings in different languages. And it was just not a joy. It was the broccoli of business. And you don't get the sexy outcome of being able to make product announcements and getting the love and accolades of the community. Instead, you're anchored to this bad brand and you have to turn it into something good. So they don't get enough credit for what they've done. And I'm really looking forward to where they go, because now they're a force for good in the ecosystem. And as the board diversifies, an executive director comes on board, all these things that happen, that will happen eventually, hopefully sooner than later, and I have confidence in that, then they all of a sudden turn into this entity that month by month is making announcements, month by month is building things up, bringing new people in, building business partnerships and alliances. I mean, for example, we just recently transferred a lot of the exchange stuff we do to the foundation. They should have always been doing it. They couldn't do it because of what Parsons had done to it. But now they are, and that's joy. It just makes my life easier. Community management is also moving its way over the foundation, and it's almost entirely there now. And that's just a joy. The Cardano Effect is funded from the foundation, and that's just a joy. This was not the case a year ago. So overall, very happy. Obviously, things could be done faster, differently. If I was there, I'd have different preferences, but it's not my call, and it shouldn't be my call. There should be diversity and independent thought. There should be federation, and they're now achieving that, and that's a beautiful thing for the ecosystem, and ultimately makes all of us stronger, and I'm very happy about that. Hey, Vassal. Good to see you, buddy. Greetings from Plovdiv. I love Vassal. He's one of my favorite people in the community. I still have those ginkgo biloba seeds. You said dates for Shelly. When are we going to get dates for Legends of Valar? Legends of Valor. You know, I did a whole video on that. One of my favorite games when I was a kid. You know, the magic of, and by the way, being a game developer, you get so many great cards. I was at my bank today, coincidentally finalizing that damn transaction. It took me 2 weeks to send a wire transfer. Holy hell. Chase canceled it and said, it's to Barclays. We don't know if it's a legitimate wire. It's like, wow, man, you guys got problems. Anyway, it's taken care of. So I finally own it. The money's out. Great. And I was talking to the banker today, and he's training right now to become a developer, and he wants to be a game developer. So we ended up chatting for about 5-10 minutes about different game engines and where the industry as a whole is at. And really, it's absolutely amazing to see what you can do with all these different engines. I mean, like Godot, Babylon are incredible, and they're open source. And then the commercial engines like Unreal and CryEngine and Unity are just remarkable as well. So really, it's an all-you-can-eat menu where you can dream something, you can create something, you can do it very quickly, and you can add all kinds of cool things. Like the motion capture suits are super cheap and easy to use and a lot of fun to use and easy to work with. Blender has gotten so much more advanced over the years since when I first went to school to now. I remember taking computer science courses, and half the kids I was taking classes with were game developers. They wanted to be game developers, and just seeing what they had to do to build a game then versus what you can do now. It's incredible. Really is incredible. So the hard part is scope. That's really the hard part of scope. You know, you have to decide your game mechanics. You have to decide, what's in bounds or not. And the challenge I have for Legends of Valor was it was built in a time when game mechanics were a realm of scarcity. Anything you wanted to do, you had to kind of just imagine it was possible, but it really wasn't. Like, oh, we will have food. Okay. Super simplistic system. Now it's like you can do anything. So you can do anything with a sleeping system. You can do anything with a food system. You can do anything with a combat system. It's like you can, because your decision space is so much larger, and the things that you can accomplish are so much grander, and the game mechanics you can integrate are so much more sophisticated and integrated, and you have so many more dimensions to play with. Touch and VR and speech and so forth. You really have to play the game of how do we cut instead of what is necessary. So it's going to be difficult. It was going to be difficult for us to kind of pare that down. Where I'm currently at is more likely than not, what I will do is I will go to Rwanda or Uganda or someplace like that, or maybe Wyoming. We'll have a competition. We'll see which one ends up, and teach a Haskell course and basically do what we did in Ethiopia with those 23 gals. And if the people pass that course, I'll hire them and say, you're game developers now. Congratulations. And then I'll train them in PureScript, and I'll train them in basically game development. And that'll be another 6 months to 9 months of education. So it'll probably take about a year to turn an average CS student graduate into a reasonable programmer, game developer. And then they can write PureScript, Babylon JS, these two things together. And then we can go do the enhanced edition. And then while I'm training all those people out, I'll have a small core of people work with me to basically figure out what we want to do with the enhanced edition of Legends of Valor. Then if we get everything right and all looks really good, and we can then start building that game, we should be able to build in about 6 months to a year. Now, right now, I'm actually having the code disassembled, and I'm working with some other people trying to restore some of the old source code so we can get all the original stuff basically pulled out. So we have that, and that small team will work with me to work our way through as we're designing the enhanced edition. And we'll release it probably open source, or at the very least as a free product, build a big community, nice fan base around it. And then we'll pull a Pillars of Eternity and do a Kickstarter type of deal and go and pre-sell and get a big, nice base of people for it and go do a remake and hopefully raise a few $1 million and build up something really remarkable. That remake I would love to do with a system like Unreal, but I want to see what CryEngine has and the new Unity builds have, because of the PS5, the new Xbox are forcing an evolution in the graphics engine game. So there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that comes on market. But that won't be relevant until 2021, 2022, that time frame, especially optimizations of these systems. And I'd love to see what the open source community can offer. So, occasionally I'll drop some hints that we're doing things. And if we do it in Rwanda, for example, we'd love to do it as a partnership with the government. They're building this beautiful development park in Kigali. That's very nice. It's like their version of Silicon Valley, and they're desperate for people to come in and build something of substance there. And it'd be super cool because we could do all kinds of vertical integration. We can have our own art team and all these other people all together in one place, and labor costs aren't so bad, so we can be a bit more generous with the amount of people we hire, so we can have a lot of diversity on that team and a lot of cool new art that hasn't really been seen before. Things tend to be very stagnant. Artistic styles tend to be very stagnant in game development. It'd be nice to bring something a little bit newer and something a little different. So I'll let you guys know. It's been amazing to see how game developers work, like real-time ray tracing with RTX. It's like, wow, that was fantasy 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Now it's just like, here we just okay. I, I was always hopeful voxels were going to be a bigger thing. Yeah, it didn't happen. No, I never followed the Star Citizen saga. We'd love to interview with our show, Crypto and Coffee Live. We're huge supporters of Cardano and work with IOHK is doing. Yeah, go ahead and tweet me, and I'll send you a PM and give you the email address of my media director, Crypto and Coffee, Rod Alexander, and we can get something set up through Rod. I'd be happy to come on. Looking for one more good question. Voxels will soon be available through the Ultra platform. I've been hearing a lot about voxels for a long time. And mathematically, they're very interesting, but I've never actually seen them rolled out. Yeah, it'd be fun to see that. It'd be fun. What do you think about Twitter fact-checking Donald Trump? Ha! They play this game. They play this game where they play this game where they say we're open platforms, anybody can be a part of it, and we don't take a position, and we're neutral, and we want as many people as to come and play. And then they say, well, that's not manageable, so we'll add a code of conduct. They have a code of conduct, and then they're like, wow, it's impossible to enforce this when we have billions of users. So we'll do selective enforcement, and nobody complains when it's people without a voice who get deplatformed or have problems. But then when they use it on political figures, then it becomes a big issue. And it's really interesting is that there's this amazing situation where every party's been on every side. Like the left was a big advocate of the Fairness Doctrine, which came out in, I think, the 40s, and it was repealed later on. Basically, it says, hey, if you're in this public utility, you have to give all sides equal time. This is the kind of the concept. And so a lot of people said we need to have the internet be a utility, and these social media platforms are not private entities, they're utilities as well, and therefore they should be regulated by Fairness Doctrine S-type ways of doing things. And then other people say, oh, no, it's a private company. They can do whatever they want, say whatever they want, censor anybody that they want. And of course, that opinion is always subject to whether you are the recipient of censorship or the beneficiary of censorship. So when it's the opposing party, then it's all cool. When it's your guy, well, it's the worst thing in the world. I do believe that these networks, because of their scale and their influence on human behavior, are utilities in a certain respect, just like the internet is. And to say that because a private company happened to have started it, that somehow that should be the final say, and a small group of people in San Francisco should basically get to decide what's legitimate speech and what's not, what's hate speech, what's not, what's facts, what's not facts, is very troublesome. Because what happens when the Communist Party of China buys one of these companies off the stock market? Then they're a private company. I guess they can just say any tweet that is anti-China is now taken down. Censorship? Oh, no, it's a private company. We're totally okay with it. So got to think it through. You have to look at all these things. So the only way to solve this problem is to make the platform a protocol like a cryptocurrency. So there was a lot of good ideas in Steam. Ultimately, like all Dan Larimer projects, some good ideas mixed with some bad ones. The bad ones overcame the good. You had to move on. So reevaluating the concept of blockchain-based social media is important, but it's a super complicated problem. And we're not going to solve it in just one protocol. You're going to have to layer things together. You need things like Prism. You need things like BATS. You need things like what we're building with Cardano. You need some notion of privacy. You need some voting systems for community curation. Once you put all these pieces together, you can build a protocol-based social network. And then the problem is solved because no private company owns the infrastructure. And therefore, they don't get to say what's legitimate or not legitimate with the infrastructure. Instead, community curation will create an effect where messages that are preferred are elevated and messages that are not preferred are phased out over time. They get dimmer and dimmer and more buried. And if you've done it right, idea flow should be very good in these systems. And the emergent property of them is that they're self-healing and resilient, and they tend to identify misinformation as opposed to accelerating the spreading of it. The problem is that we live in an age of confirmation bias, and we live in an age of siloing. People tend to share things they already agree with, and they tend to censor things that they disagree with. So that means that instead of having the platform be an opportunity for people to diversify their opinion or increase their understanding of the world, it's an opinion to accelerate the rigidity of their existing opinions and the stability of their opinions to a point where they think that everybody believes what they believe, and the people who don't must be in the minority, whether they are or not. So obviously these systems are not working as intended. And there's some great books on this, like Alex Pentland's Social Physics, for example. That's a great book to look at. So it's a super hard problem. We'll certainly get involved in that space. Not this year, kids, but we will. It's something important to me. And the censorship is not going to go away. The censorship is going to continue. This is just the first shot. It's pretty unbelievable that the United States president, whoever that president happens to be, is basically having his tweets be labeled with disclaimers. if that's the precedent, it's like, wow, this is not healthy for discourse. The reality is, whether you love him or hate him, it's the most powerful person in the world. He occupies the most powerful office in the world and has the ability to end all human life unilaterally because he could just simply nuke us all if he wanted to. So that's the reality of that office. Whether that's good or wise or just or not, well, that's a different debate, but that's the reality of the office as it is. They have their own Praetorian Guard. It's called JSOC. And any man who can send black helicopters with special forces and shoot you in the middle of the night, like Obama did with Osama bin Laden, it should give you a sense of the power of that office. So it's not really a good idea for a private company in Silicon Valley to insert itself into this conversation. Some things truly are above your pay grade, and this is probably one of them. And Zuckerberg is playing it really smart, in my view. The proper answer to this problem is not how do we regulate these platforms. The proper answer of this problem is to liberate the users from platforms controlled by centralized private companies and bring them into protocols that are open source, decentralized, dynamic and decentralized, and censorship resilient. Then have private companies and social structures and regulatory structures live on top of that to curate some of these things so that those are safe spaces for certain types of conduct and communication. That's probably the better way of doing it. The other way around, where you have the whole stack vertically integrated, one private company controls it, it just is counterproductive, and no one will ever be happy, ever. Because maybe you agree with the censorship today, you certainly won't agree with it tomorrow. When the owners change, the agenda changes. It's not sustainable, and it's impossible. No one elected these people. They don't deserve the right to decide what's truth and what's not truth, and they don't deserve the right to decide what's fair and not fair. What's better, to have a president who speaks eloquently and never says anything controversial, but then drones more people than any other person alive, or a president that speaks crassly and does less of that? What's real violence in that case? Again, not taking positions or sides here, but you have to understand these are super nuanced things and you will never get it right. So sometimes you just have to let it go and let it happen, unless you basically want to be God and run everything and think you're so wise and so smart that you can. Anyway, now almost 2 hours. Been a good night. Y'all take care now. Cheers.